Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the State of Vue, where you can hear from the core contributors, library author, and more about the various projects within the Vue ecosystem. Before we move on, I would like to talk a little bit about ourselves. My name is Simone Cuomo, and I work at Diebold Labs. And Diebold Labs provides architectural guidance, staff augmentation, on-demand subject matter experts, temporary CTOs, one-on-one pair programming, mentorship, and open source strategy support. If you're interested in actually seeing more of the work we've done with our amazing clients, you can take a look at the portfolio page on dis.co/portfolio. And if you're actually even more interested and would like to come and join and work with us, you can actually email us at jobs@dis.co. We're currently looking for software engineer and DevOps engineer, but there's a jobs page on our website with more information. Next one up is, all ecosystems are full of different tools that are needed on a day-to-day basis. And if you would like to check the one needed for your Vue project, you can go to vue.framework.dev and see what tools may best work for you or contribute to this open source project. Lastly, before we move on, is a few words about the upcoming event that we got coming up. So on August the 9th, we got State of Web Component, where you can catch up on all the latest news about what is possible, improved, and coming soon in the ever-growing adoption and use of web components. We will be covering new toolings and unique ways to incorporate web components that you may not know yet. Next up, we have Women's in Tech monthly mentoring on August the 17th. This month, we're going to welcome Shandai Person from Netflix. They will giving a session. And second up, we then have a State of Web Performance, where we will be talking with the community members, library author, and maintainers to discuss community initiatives, how to identify performance challenges, metrics to measure, and resources to help you. Next one up, we have two different mentoring, React mentoring on September the 6th and Vue mentoring on September the 13th. The mentoring events are the possibility for you to speak to experts and ask questions in a small, welcoming group of community members. You can ask specific use case questions or even just network and chat about your career advice. And last but not least, we actually got State of Dino on the September 27th, where we will be discussing the growth of the Dino ecosystem, updates, roadmap, and upcoming initiative with maintainers. Join us live to get an opportunity to learn more and ask questions. The moment that you've all been waiting for has actually arrived. Time to introduce our host, Evan Yu. Evan, thank you for being here.
Hello.
And then we are also lucky to have fantastic panelists today. Jessica is Jessica's here as well, just added to the stream. Unfortunately, Sebastian is not able to join us today, but I would like to give opportunity for everyone to introduce themselves, starting from the top left. Thorsten.
Hi. I'm Thorsten Lünborg. Most people likely know me as Linusborg from the Vue.js core team. That's it. Jessica.
Yeah, my name is Jess. I'm a Cypress ambassador alumni person. You'll find me around the Vue testing ecosystem.
Awad.
Next.
Yeah, I'm Abdelrahman Awad. I'm a software engineer at Rasail, and I am the author of Vue Validate. Luke.
Yeah, my name's Luke Diebold. I'm part of the Quasar core team, doing mostly content creation type stuff, and also some app extensions to support Quasar.
Amazing. Last but not least, Bjorn.
Hello. So I'm Bjorn Lu. You also know me as Bluey on GitHub. So I'm a Vue team member and do open source stuff at my free time. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you everybody for the introductions. This event is a discussing event. Like, we're going to talk about it and we're going to actually have a chat. But before we do so, I would like to give 10-15 minutes to Evan to actually talk about the Vue 3.3 and what is coming next. And after that, the panelists will be able to ask questions. And also, if you are on YouTube now watching, please write your question in the chat and we'll be able to answer. But Evan, take the show.
Cool. Sure. So many of us know, So most of the work in the past few months has been focused on 2.7 and stabilizing 2.7. So 3.3 is currently in early phase. We have a bunch of things that's planned. Some of them are still being explored. So there are a few important features that we want to finalize in 3.3. The first one is suspense, which has been flagged as experimental since the original release of Vue 3. So we think 3.3 would be a good time to finally make it stable. So in order to do that, we have to the challenge here is that suspense is being used across. So it has a lot of cross sectors with the router, with Nuxt, like higher level meta frameworks that is utilizing suspense. So so we need, which is why we want to group all the known issues currently that's surrounding suspense together. Then we go through a process where we first we need to figure out whether there needs to be API changes. And if there needs to be, what are the best way to go about that? Since it could potentially, because it's experimental, there are still some room for us to, some wiggle room to introduce potentially breaking changes to make sure that we get suspense. Because once it hits stable, we can't make breaking changes anymore. So we want to be super careful about that. Aside from suspense, there's also the reactivity transform, which has gone through several iterations, and we feel that the current version seems to be in a pretty good place. So we want to finalize that. There may be some small minor final changes that we want to land, but nothing major in that aspect. So these are the two major things we want to ship as stable in 3.3. And some of the highly asked features from the community, including supporting external types in script setup macros. So for example, when using define props with the type syntax, currently it requires all the types to be inside the script setup block so that it can be statically analyzed. So we want to support external types as well from another file so that you can share the same interface across multiple components. Another one is so there are a number of bags of issues that we've identified. We also want to tackle, for example, issues related to keep alive. There have been feature requests on providing more fine-grained controls of the lifespan of the cache components in keep alive. And there's a bunch of web components related bugs that has been long-standing, which may require thinking about how, particularly related to the handling of CSS when using define custom element to build as web components. So these may require API changes or introducing behavior that wasn't there before. So it's a kind of a tricky area, which is why we didn't want to do it in patch releases. So this is another area that may see some changes. And finally, the final bag of issues will be SSR related. So the most important one would be built-in lazy hydration. So the idea is that when we define async components, right? Currently, we use async components as code split points. So an async component currently, if it's not used on the initial page, it will not be loaded, but it's immediately loaded when it's used on the current page. However, we realize that, okay, there could be other more subtle situations. For example, it is used on the current page, but it's not in the current view. Like the user hasn't scrolled down yet, so it's impossible for the user to interact with it. So the idea is that making define async component a natural place to define a hydration strategy. Say, for example, say define async component with hydration in Vue. So the API obviously is subject to final design, but the idea is to define an option saying, okay, I don't want to load this async component until it's scrolled into Vue. And so when it scrolls to Vue, it loads and then hydrates. Or you can define it as to only hydrate when the user hovers over it, or something like that. So this is to some extent inspired by some new crop of meta frameworks like Astro, where it allows. So Astro is essentially more like a high island architecture where you have a purely static page, but only with islands with conditional hydration strategies. But in an SPA context, we can adopt similar strategies at async component code split points. So another aspect of it is give users the ability to mark part of the template to be only dynamic on the server, because we noticed that, for example, when we are rendering the outline of navigation of a website, so the navigation structure is rendered using dynamic data on the server because it may depend on something that's in the database. However, that data does not ever change on the client. So essentially, on the client, you can consider the navigation structure to be completely static. The menu will not jump around, right? So once it's rendered on the client. So so there's a separation. So the conceptual separation of a type of content that is dynamic on the server but static on the client. So we want a way for users to denote that, saying, okay, this part of the content is that type of content, so that it's still rendered dynamically during SSR, but on the client or during build, we can do optimizations with that information. We can say, okay, if the content if these data is only used during SSR, then we don't even need to include these data in the client build. This part of the template don't even need to compile into render functions on the client, and maybe they can just be directly stringified ahead of time. So this is also an interesting area to explore. And finally, there are small quality of life improvements that we've been accumulated over time. For example, better warnings when you are using a wrong component during SSR, better warnings when you are writing invalid markup structure. For example, you're like nesting a P inside another P element. So this is technically wrong. And when you SSR that to the client, it actually creates a mismatch. So this is probably the most common source of hydration mismatch. So we want to be able to catch that during compile time. And then there could be optimizing the output of the SSR string concatenation so that it's somewhat deminified out of the box when doing SSR. So a lot of interesting things that we want to do there as well. So these are the major areas that's planned for 3.3, so which is, in my opinion, already quite ambitious. So maybe we'll trim it down to a little bit, depending on how the progress goes in the next couple months. But yeah, that is currently the plan. And also we have, so for the team internally, we have been collecting some feedback internally. So there are a bunch of issues we want to address. That's, for example, to make it work better with the router, with Volar, with Vite as well. Cool, that's it.
Amazing. I'm going to add everyone back into the stream. Let me see if I miss everybody. I don't think I missed anybody, so that's good. Thanks so much for the intro, Evan. Anyone has any question regarding the 3.3 intro?
I'm mostly curious about resources. Do you have any? Do you have any of this written down yet? Because I feel like I need to rewatch this video like 5 times. It was there's so much in 3.3 stuff. Excited.
Yeah. So I've been basically having a draft of the stuff we want to do. I still need to organize it a little bit because I'm basically having these small areas, and I want to also put all the current existing issues that's related to each area into basically a document. Yeah, so that's coming soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
tweet it out when you do. My question is on SSR. So I know that you guys are putting a lot of focus on all these changes. Are they being made by your own assumptions, or do you know if there is an extensive use of SSR with the current Vue.js?
So a lot of the needs essentially arises in Nuxt because we know that we see a lot of production use cases of Nuxt 2, and we expect that a very decent chunk of our users will be opting for a full stack meta framework when they're building applications this way. So Ssr optimizations is obviously going to be super important. And also, I believe there are a certain categories of optimizations that are only, that are only possible when you essentially design it with a meta framework in mind. And I think it has been somewhat in a trend because you see latest stuff in React pretty much assumes that it only works in Next.js. Obviously, we don't want to make it that way for Vue, but in a lot of ways, because SSR is such an important use case, I mean, a lot of these don't only apply to SSR. It would also benefit statically generated sites, like sites built with vPress, or you have an SPA and you just want to pre-render a certain page. These would be all covered as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. Any other question regarding this subject, guys? Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I have a question regarding the suspense API, since I guess it recommends using a sync setup hook, right? So I think there was this annoying issue where you have a wait, then you try to inject something, so it breaks since it can't recognize the current component or something.
Right. So this has technically already been solved in script setup. So when you await, the script setup, the compiler already automatically saves the context before the await and then restores it after the await. So if you're using script setup, then you don't need to worry about that anymore.
Great, thank you.
I have a question for the async component, lazy hydration. So it seems like a very interesting new approach. And I think maybe existing frameworks like Astro you mentioned, would they benefit from this new optimization as well? And besides Nuxt for it?
Yeah, definitely. So this is generic. It would be just a very simple addition to the existing define async component API at Vue. So any higher level framework that actually, I think this would benefit not even just SSR applications, because you can use that to delay the loading of that chunk as well. Although the benefit of delaying the loading of the chunk is somewhat not as a pure win compared to delaying the hydration work, because hydration is strictly CPU time that's blocking the main thread. But loading a JavaScript chunk without actually evaluating it is actually not that bad, because it saves the time when the user actually starts interacting with it.
Yeah.
So so it's interesting, but yeah, going back to your question, this would benefit anything that's built on top of Vue, including Astro, or I mean, that can work with Vue, right? So if Astro, you're using Vue inside Astro, then it would help in that situation as well. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My shortcut didn't work. So maybe I overheard it, but what are the plans, or what are your ideas for the timeframe concerning reactivity transform? Or did you mention it and I was? Yeah,
so I will want to essentially ship it as stable in 3.3. We may rename the double dollar function just to make it more descriptive. But that's about it. I think the biggest concern that people currently have is how would it be introduced and how would it be documented throughout the docs. I think for the initial phase, we ship it as stable, but we only sort of keep it as an opt-in feature for people who want to actually use it. The the thing is, it comes in several phases, right? So there are users who are early adopters who just use it no matter what stage it is in. And there are users who will only try it after you declare it as stable. And then there are users who would only try it if you document it as the way of doing things. So, so I think we have to sort of do it in stages. We have to ship it as stable first, so that that specific group of people are willing to try it, so that we get more feedback in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I see it similar to how we currently have like 3 different ways of like defining props. Like you have the options API way, you have like, and then you have 2 different sub variations in the define props functions. And so that's for some people that I interact with, that is not a big deal, because they pretty quickly grasp that it's just a little bit different way of writing the same thing in a way. But for others, it feels like a lot of indirection is being introduced to the framework. And so this is like, there's a price that comes with the new, better ways of doing things. And that is that there are now multiple ways to do things, which can be confusing. And so especially the question about the docs is pretty significant in my book.
Yeah, I think this has been raised over time. I just want to acknowledge that, there's always a cost of introducing multiple ways of doing things inside a framework. But in some way, you're faced with several options when you're dealing with a long living framework like Vue, which has been around for 7-8 years, right? So option 1 is we don't ever introduce any big new things again, and Vue is just Vue, and which is probably fine for a lot of people, but obviously that's that essentially locks us out of any future innovations or possible ways to evolve. The other option is you just create a brand new thing, call it something else. The problem is that existing Vue users won't actually be able to benefit from it if it's actually a good idea. So you're locking out a lot of people from the option of just even trying it, because a lot of people, for them, it's like, I want to just stick to the stable thing. If the cost of trying this new idea is I have to switch to a completely new thing, that's just too risky for me, right? And the final option is what we're doing right now, is we introducing new ideas into the framework while allowing you to still stay on the old way, or if you prefer the old way, you can still the same Vue that has ever been there. It stays the same. It's just new stuff being added in, right? It's just different balances, different options. So
totally.
Right. So the final, basically the idea boils down to, do you want to introduce new ideas or not, right? So my answer is yes, absolutely. I want to keep introducing new ideas. So for me, the only option to do that is to introduce it without branching it into something completely different.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I think it's just something that needs to be like, these kind of introductions need to spread out a bit, and just so you don't overwhelm people. But I think like I interact with a lot of people on Discord day to day, and like I would say the overall majority is pretty fine with this switch between this was the one way and now we have another way as well, and I can pretty easily, the underlying concepts are the same, so I just have to get used to a little bit different syntax. But there is a sizable group that is a little bit frustrated with the confusion that sometimes comes with multiple ways of doing things, and like the old way, then you get to another code base and you get the new way, and you have to relearn everything in quotation marks.
Right.
But that is something that we just have to actively deal with and confront. But that's the price, as you explained, to innovation.
Yeah,
that we
I
have to
think
pay.
one of the things I truly regret at this point is not introducing script setup earlier. Like if we had script setup right there with 3.0, it would probably be a lot better, right? Because right now, one of the things people complain is you can write script setup or you can use the setup function, which was the only possible way when you first introduced 3.0. And arguably, a lot of people hated Composition API because of the setup function. It's not a super nice DX compared to script setup, right? So I've seen a lot of people say, okay, script setup really redeemed Composition API for me, and it's just like convinced them to actually switch over. So yeah, I think if we had script setup there, it's essentially, a clean switch from options to script setup would make it much easier for a lot of people to see, okay, there's two ways of doing things. This way is also pretty nice, compared to what we went through is basically a lot of people saying, okay, this new way sucks. And then a couple months later, they realize, okay, there's yet another way of doing things, which makes it a little bit better. But now we have 3 ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate, but hopefully over time, because we've shipped the new docs and script setup is essentially being the recommended way of using Composition API now. So hopefully over time, the community will catch up. Yeah.
Another question that I would have is, have you already experimented with how you would approach the issue of imported interfaces for defined props? Because my what I like, my only thing that I could compare it to is probably that TypeScript ESLint also analyzes types throughout your code base. And they also struggle with performance problems quite often in larger code bases. So that would be like something that I would be that I see as a potential risk, because somehow our compiler has to walk the file system basically and pull out all of these types.
There is definitely risk in there. I think the risk is probably more contained compared to the ESLint thing, because a lot of the ESLint rules essentially needs knowledge of not just a single import path of types, but the entire project. For us, we're only concerned about first the case where the defined props interface actually is using an externally imported type, and then when we follow that type into the external file, we only care about that specific type. So any of the analytics that we do is pretty well. So it's a much smaller subset compared to a full type analysis. So we definitely have to run it in real projects to see the performance impacts, and I believe it should work just fine for most projects, because I can imagine the most common case we're trying to solve is just 3 components, maybe importing the same literal object interface, which probably doesn't contain super complex imported types from other places. I think we will have to probably break it down where if the user using an interface that's importing from dependency, I don't know if that would even make sense.
If you want a use case for that, you should look at the GraphQL type gen props for Cypress in the monorepo. That is the heaviest example I can think of. It's
that'd be super helpful.
Yeah,
you're a little bit quiet for me, Jess.
Sorry, I turned my gain down. All right, yeah. If you're looking for something to break Velar and look at very complex, external interfaces being imported, we do a lot of type gen with Nexus and GraphQL inside of Cypress. Yeah, I can show you around it's a monorepo as well. So it's probably the worst case example I can think of for types. And it's the whole thing is TypeScript. So I'll happily show you around that sometime. There's only 3 folders that are Vue, and the rest is
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, thinking about it, I think the risk is even smaller than I thought, because our type analysis of the props types only stops at the first key level. So essentially, when we see that, okay, this is a prop with a type that's pointing to a complex type, we don't crawl further that type, because we only generate a very approximate runtime type equivalent of that. All we need to know is the keys of the props. That's more important information. Yeah.
But you could quickly end up with something like you have a list of props for that is the main list, and then for this component you only need 5 of them, so they have a like omit all of the props, and then like a union with like four props that you drop. I think that would be something that you would come across quite early in terms of when and so you would have to import that type and then actually apply the omit to get there it gets tricky. There it quickly gets into the territory of TypeScript ESLint.
Definitely, yeah. So we can see, so I think the best balance we can hit is essentially implement a reasonable subset of the supported features. Yeah.
Yeah, we just have to be explicit about what is supported and what not.
Yeah.
Amazing. Nice chat. Nice chat. There is a question. There's a couple of questions from the audience, so I'm going through some of them. So the first one, I'll rephrase it from Milos, that they've seen that the app has been upgraded now to 2.7, and is asking how stable it is. Any big issues to look for, or should people be ready to upgrade to 2.7? As we know, 2.7 has been made as a step towards the 3-point migration. So what has been the feedback so far, 2.7?
So there really isn't too much to worry about on upgrading 2.7. So we've released like 8 patches released now already. So most of the major issues should have been caught, and 2.7 has seen, let me see. Let me just pull up the latest stats here. Because I've been checking up the stats, and the adoption rate has been pretty good. Versions. So we're seeing more than close to 500,000 downloads of 2.7, all the versions added up in the past week. So yeah, I would say that's quite a lot, and we've only like got 2 to 3 issues in the past few days. So I would say 2.7 is pretty stable now. Yeah, if you follow so the upgrade guide is in the release notes in the change log. So if you just follow that, I don't think there should be any major issues. I've heard a lot of people have just upgraded without anything breaking, so which shouldn't, because it is backwards compatible. Yeah.
Indeed. Amazing.
I have a question on 2.7. When is the Jsx transform ready? I found a repo, but it is not in the blog post, so I was wondering.
2.7?
Yeah, there's a specific Vue 2.7 Jsx transform.
Oh, right.
That is pending.
I think Soda was working on that, and I think he already did it.
I tried it.
I need to confirm with. So, yeah, Vue plugin. Search this. I think we mentioned this in a chat some time ago.
It's good.
I had some specific ecosystem
Jsx
issues, like with Storybook, it didn't support 2.7 yet.
Okay, so,
but that was,
I just posted it in the chat. It's called Vue plugin U2 Jsx.
Yeah, I tried it. I'll open. So you're saying it's ready to try and open issues against at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Good. If there's no more question about 2.7 from the panelists, I have one. We'll go to the next question. I'll rephrase it as the next question from the audience. Is the question was what went wrong with Vue 3 ecosystem? Why is not to be able to keep up? I will rephrase this question because it's something that I can see myself as well working as a Vue consultant on this dot is, it's hard sometimes because there are so many packages that is still not upgraded to Vue 3. Vuetify is one of the few. But if you will go back, what do you think has been holding up all these package maintainers to actually upgrade? And I know there's some package maintainers here as well that can give their thoughts. But when do you think, what is holding them up? When do you think is the ecosystem really going to be on Vue 3? Because currently there's still still in between.
From my personal experience, it really depends on what kind of dependencies you're on, right? I think from my personal experience, like hearing about people saying the biggest blockers are Nuxt and Vuetify, but both are close. Both are in RC phases now. So I think the stable release of Nuxt 3 and Vuetify 3 would probably mark a transition, be considered a milestone in the ecosystem transition. And regarding some of the smaller dependencies, so I heard like there is a case where there was this, I forgot his name, but this developer mentioned that, so 6 months ago, he was trying to upgrade to Vue 3 and noticed that half of his dependencies were not Vue 3 supporting. And 6 months later, he just checked and noticed that, okay, like actually most of them are now have a Vue 3 compatible version. So he managed to actually upgrade his app to Vue 3. So I think there is definitely visible progress there. I think the general statement of that the ecosystem is just still not there is a bit of debatable, because it really, like for some people, for a decent number of people, right, their dependencies are in fact all Vue 3 compatible now. Sorry. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, that's
my mic just died. My headphone just died. But either way, what was I talking about just now?
The Vue 3 ecosystem.
So the Vue 3 ecosystem. So I think there are the unfortunate fact that there are a lot of smaller dependencies that, these smaller packages that's shipped by developers who are just doing it in their spare time as a hobby. Them doing a big bang upgrade to support a whole new version of thing, it's probably, for them, they ship the project, they probably just let it out there with no expectation to keep maintaining it forever. So I think with big bang rewrites, that's just the reality is when you ship something that's incompatible, there will be a bunch of maintainers of these libraries. They'd be like, okay, like I just don't have time to actually do this, and they will drop off. But I think you'll also see a new crop of libraries that's popping up to replace those old ones. I think one of the example is, and there are great examples of libraries supporting both versions, like Vue Use, right? So Anthony Fu has been doing a super great job. And I think one of the things I actually want to see is because the way Vue libraries were written in the past has been somewhat, there was no sort of the way of writing a Vue library for Vue 2, because you can ship it as a mixin, as a plugin, as this or that. Now you have an answer. If it can be shipped as a composable, you should just ship it as a composable. So which leads to projects like Vue Use, where you pretty much find everything you want from a library in a big collection, and people can keep adding to it and contributing to it. And I think that's actually that's actually a great improvement in terms of future ecosystem development. And in some way, it's unfortunate that we probably lost a bunch of libraries that's no longer maintained and with no intention to upgrade to support Vue 3. But on the other way, we opened up a whole new way of making it easier for people to ship libraries with Vue.
Standardize, yeah.
So these are definitely trade-offs. It's unfortunate that we have to do that. I think you know, like this has been repeated over and over again. There are definitely things we could have been done better, but I think in the end, the net result will probably be better, still be a net positive for the long run.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to add is that when you look at like Vuetify and Nuxt 3, it's not like they were taking so long solely because they were trying to move to Vue 3, but more or less because they took the chance or the opportunity to do a big rewrite and introduce another new and different ways
leave and rejoin because my phone is not working now.
Okay. So for better or worse, something like Nuxt comes now with a vastly different and optimized architecture and ways of doing things. But because they chose to do that, it also took them longer to end up in a place where they are now approaching the final release. So the upside of that is if you waited until now, with the Nuxt 2 app, with Nuxt Bridge and everything, for example, you probably have a nice migration path onto the new architecture. And it's a new architecture that comes with a lot of great additions and optimizations and stuff like that. So it's not like the point is just Nuxt 3 didn't take like 2 years because of Vue 3. It took 2 years because they rebuilt everything better from the ground up, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a great, great point to raise, is that people took this idea of, Vue 3 is rewriting from scratch, let's write it out ourselves as well. But people we see that within the ecosystem, like, oh, it's because Vue 3 has done some main changes, and that's why they're taking longer. But reality is it's a complete decision. Thank you for covering that.
100% for Vuetify as well.
Luke, how would you like? What are your thoughts on this? Because Quasar was on Vue 3 quite quickly, right? So Quasar kind of like took the road of, hey, we have a great foundation. We focus on switching to Vue 3, and that worked quite well and quite fast, right? Compared to the approach that Vuetify took or that Nuxt took.
Well, like I think a lot of the points you just made are really relevant because Quasar version 1 was a massive change in the API. So like the creator was thinking about the API for years and years and then implemented that on Vue 2. And so when Vue 3 came along, it was like, well, we've already got this good foundation. It just happened to have already happened before Vue 3. I don't know how much of that was planned. But I mean, to his credit as well, I don't actually know what it looked like, but I just imagined him sort of sitting in a dark room in a den for like 2 weeks straight doing nothing but coding. So a lot of it was really hard work, but I think part of it was also the fact that that architecture work was done like probably about a year plus before Vue 3 came along and was stable.
Nick, when you were talking about that person in the dark room, were you talking about yourself?
No, I didn't do it. Goodness, no.
You're sitting in the dark right now.
I'm talking about Razvan.
I'm just joking.
Because he's an absolute machine, and so people wanted it to happen, so he made it happen. Yeah.
Amazing. And thank you for doing that, by the way. He was one of the first to actually, embed use Vue 3 and the ecosystem based back. Okay. What else? Let me see. It was mentioned in the chat as well that Vue Demi really helped because it really probably something to think in the future if there's ever going to be a Vue 4 for that to actually be released at the same time as the Vue 4 because I know that it helped quite a lot of.
I think Vue Demi was like out there in a matter of days.
It was
a few weeks after Vue 3 dropped. And we integrated it into the organization in within a month. So it's definitely an idea that we appreciated and that we will definitely keep in our box of tools for the future.
Hopefully no Vue 4 rewrite.
No,
At least
no,
not for
no.
a couple of years. I think even need a couple of years to recover, and the rest of the team.
I think web developers or developers in general can sort of have a tendency to focus on you know, a lot of things that go wrong and what we could have done better. But I think we need to take a moment to like appreciate, you know, tools like Vue Demi. Like, holy cow, I can write code. I can write composables for Vue 3 that's fully typed that's going to work on Vue 2. And I barely even tested on there. I'm like, oh, I should just give this a try on Vue 2. And it all just works. Like, that's remarkable. Some of the tooling that we've got. And, you know, with Vue 2.7, which is practically Vue 3 in terms of what it can do, like, I personally feel extremely grateful for the upgrade path that we've been given here. And, you know, before we moved from Vue 2 to Vue 3 for our Quasar project, which was quite a large project, we were already using like the script setup, some of the unplug-in functionality that made that a lot smoother as well. Yeah, so I mean, I for one are incredibly grateful that there was a lot of tooling that basically allowed me to write Vue 3 code before Vue 3 was even released yet. So I'm curious to know if anybody else has had experiences like that where they were able to, you know, really jump on top of this before Vue 3 was even released.
So I left Cyprus about 2 weeks ago, and I inherited a front-end code base. I inherited a component library, and have to come up with an upgrade strategy for like 7 upstream, downstream repos. I forget which way it goes. Sorry, it's early for me. And we're coming up with that upgrade path, right? The first thing we're doing is swapping Vite out to get all of the build systems on the same compiler path, right? The second thing we're doing is taking this component library and integrating Vue Demi. And we're finding more and more that each of the libraries, the core maintained libraries, generally have an upgrade path. So let's look at Pina, for example. Pina has docs on how to do a one-to-one mapping on Vuex to Pina. It's explicit that it also supports Vue 2, which you might not know unless you recently looked at the docs. So a lot of the tooling has recently updated their docs with upgrade strategies. I will say I was surprised after leaving Cyprus how much it's going to help us to have Cypress component testing. The first thing we're doing is adding a testing layer, and it's much more compatible, I think, than Vue test utils raw is. Between the two versions, I think it's going to be a very simple migration between the two. I was very surprised. I was like, I kind of like patted myself and the rest of the team on the head. I DM'd everybody. I was like, wow, it actually works. It's going to be useful. But that's our upgrade path so far.
So one or two people might remember that I actually kind of talked about this topic in Amsterdam a little bit. And I'm still working on this project, but I have trouble finding the time currently to actually move it forward. But I've done a lot of experimentation, and what I come up with is that one of the biggest challenges, actually, if you have like a library that needs to use Vue files and compile into bundles, is to manage the different dependencies or the dependency conflicts. So you kind of don't really get around having a kind of monorepo or workspaces set up where you can separate this in some way or another. And the other important point is just that you need to find a way to write your source files so that you don't have to double like duplicate things. And what I found is that actually for a couple of things you can write a small polyfill or something. For other things you just need to know that there are subtle differences that you can take into account. For example, a transition group component now by default doesn't have a root element. It doesn't need one because we have fragments in Vue 3, but you can, either that's not really a problem for you because your styling is not affected, or you just give it a tag prop and say tag span, and then it's just compatible with Vue 2. So, but that's a lot of knowledge that you need, and that's also something I'm trying to document. But I think there should be, like, I hope to come up with something like project templates that make it easier to start a new project for a library, copy over your source files from Vue 2, then just adjust them in a way that makes them compatible with Vue 3, and then build two versions of your package and then release them. I think that would be maybe an upgrade path that would allow to maintain both versions for some time. Yeah.
Are you?
But it's
oh, sorry.
Do
you mean like a VTES, like GitHub template for library authors for component libraries? Or what do you mean?
I mean something like GitHub templates, like project templates. Because
for component library authors.
Yeah, right.
I was doing this last week, like just like messing around. Like that would be extremely useful.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtle things. Like I was using PNPM, sorry, for setting up the workspace, which is very good until I encountered that, like, for example, Vue template compiler actually has a dependency on the Vue package, because when you import it, it checks for the Vue package existence and the version in the package JSON, but it's not in the peer dependencies. So PNPM says there's no Vue package in some circumstances. So there's a few things that you have to figure out. But yeah, I already have it online as under Vue Bridge, but it's not stable yet, so it will surely take another few weeks or months. I'm lacking time. But yeah, so what I wanted to get at is that, like, for packages that don't actually use single file components, with Vue 2.7 or Vue Demi, you really have a nice path of supporting like the old and the new world at the same time without putting in too much work. And the last frontier, so to speak, is like, if you really need Vue files, if you have a like component library that is not too big, but that is just useful because it has a date picker or something that is popular, then you probably are standing in front of the problem of how do I set up my repository in a way that I can support both without putting in twice the work. Because many of these people probably have Vue 2 projects. They don't want to upgrade the next major to Vue 3 and then like have Vue 2 as legacy because they're using it. So yeah, I think that is like one of the main points.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Make sure to tweet it out when it's ready. You did say next week, yeah, or end of the week, or sorry. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a question. I know that most of you have been very busy conferencing, either live conferencing or you actually been remote. But for the people that missed the conference, what is the one thing that you've taken out that you would like to share about conferences? Either is a talk to find out on the internet or something coming up. So anything you would like to share with the rest of the community that you've heard in conferences or during coffees or anything?
Yeah, I'm actually going to a Co-Singapore conference tomorrow. I'm not speaking, but just going there for fun because this is literally going to be the first offline conference I've been to in the last 2 years. So it's been pretty weird experience. Like all the talks I've been given in the past few years are like remote, either recorded. It's just, there's been no in-person connection whatsoever. So it's going to be finally going to be able to meet some people. Yeah.
Good for you. Amazing. Anyone else? I know that you guys, some of you have been involved in Vue Amsterdam, and Jessica, you've been busy going right and left.
Sure. Yeah, so I was at Vue Amsterdam and then VueConf US. I'm really stoked about Histoire and how the ecosystem seems to be rallying around Vite in general. So Histoire, for those that don't know, is a drop-in replacement for Storybook that is Vite powered. It was created by Acronym, Guillaume, you might know him as. He's the Vue Dev Tools creator. along with a lot of other things I'm not going to list. And he's been playing with Histoire, which is really it's made for frameworks that use single file components. And Storybook, the API, is not as friendly for frameworks that use single file components, and it's extremely coupled to Webpack, or has been in the past. And so I'm very stoked that Guillaume has been kind of nagging him on Discord a little bit. I'm really stoked that he has a Vue 3 Vite Storybook drop-in replacement, and he plans to get 2.7 out shortly, and then he also plans to get it to be framework agnostic, so people who like Svelte, etc., can start using this Vite-powered Storybook. Vite first, I would say. Storybook to write their stories. I'm really excited for things like, automatic knobs based on types if you're using TypeScript. Those are the features I'm really stoked for, that I'm kind of manually implementing in Cypress while I wait a little bit. So Histoire has me really, really stoked. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
I also wanted to talk about, to mention Histoire, so now I only have to say that I will be, so I'm from Germany, and I've never given a talk on a German real conference. I was on a meetup in Berlin about Vue.js, I think, or a Vue.js road trip mini thing. And so this is now there's a Vue.js conference in Berlin in beginning of October 5th. And so this will be actually my first big conference talk in Germany concerning Vue. So pretty stoked about that, but it's still in English. And yeah, so also pretty happy that there's in-person conferences again, because those are much more fun. Yeah.
I need new shirts. I need conferences. My shirts are running out. I need to go back to conferences again. Any from Bjorn, Howard?
We just had Quasar Conf, but that was an online conference. It wasn't in real person, which was amazing. So much fun. It was really cool just to see like a whole bunch of Quasar devs. You forget that there are real life people and they're not just like robot text coming at you from a screen. So it was really cool to see some real faces of other developers. So if anyone wants to check out that. Just go to quasar.dev, and in the top left corner, there's a big button there about jumping over to the YouTube video of that conference. I had a quick question on Histoire, if I'm saying that right. I feel very fancy. So I can develop live in Histoire, right? So if I make changes in my SFCs, I'm going to see those changes live in Histoire.
You get all the power of Vite and Vite
Oh
speed.
my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't just need to, because currently I use Cypress as like a playground. I just have a component test that does nothing, and then I just change the props in it so that I can go from the inside out when I develop rather than going from the outside in. So now I can do that with Histoire and do bad practices like not testing. So
yeah.
maybe that's
did you see my tweet yesterday? I feel like you're playing into my tweet yesterday when I said I'm writing my Cypress component tests in a Histoire compatible way. Yeah.
No, but you're welcome.
Thank you. It was just like so perfect. Yeah, so I'm doing both. I'm testing my components directly, and then I'm making a .story file, which is just a Vue component, and it contains the knobs in it. And then once Histoire is ready for Vue 2.7, I'm gonna rip out my manually created knobs in the usage component, the .story.vue file. I'm gonna rip that out, and then Histoire will just slurp that up, and then I'll have tested stories as well as like tested like unit test stuff. But that's my plan, Luke.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I would show you if I didn't work for a private company now.
Anyone who doesn't get how awesome that is, check out Histoire or check your Pulse, because one of those things is the problem here.
It's the development experience is changed so much in the last year and a half, I think. Vite, Ssr now. And we're also learning different languages, guys. So
it follows follows the tradition, because both Vue and Vite are also French words.
Yeah, it's always French. Always French. Yeah. Is Quasar a different language? That is like the dumbest question I've ever asked.
I don't know if it's from another language, but a quasar is like one of the most energy, like explosive anomalies.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
It's a physics word. Very good.
Physics and stuff.
It's early for you, Jess. It's early for you.
It is very early, and I am not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think going back to the conference, I think maybe you mentioned that VidCon is happening soon, around October.
Yes.
So yeah, it's I think been a big news on Twitter recently, and got a pretty sweet number on my ticket. So yeah, if you're interested in like the entire Vue ecosystem, like rollup, Bun will be there as well. I think it'd be a great conference if you're interested. Yeah.
Is Vue Japan announced yet?
It's Vue Fest Japan, but it's online. I think it's still in CFP phase.
Yeah, no, I just wasn't sure if they have a website yet.
I think they do.
It'll be October, I think. One of those 2 months. But yeah, it's online.
VueFest.jv/2022.
Very nice. Oh, it's a beautiful website. Oh, man. People should go to this website just to look at how pretty it is. They did an amazing job. Okay, yeah, it's October. Very good.
Should I also mention, when Vue Conf was raised and you could see all those tickets popping up in Twitter. Oh, my ticket, number 2, number 3, I go after 10 minutes, number 100, I go after 20 minutes, 1,000. And now I think it's like, 6,000? Like, goodness, never ends. So that shows how much, how ready the ecosystem is for it. So thank you for raising that, Bjorn.
Yeah, it's a hit. It's a hit for sure.
Yeah. Howard, anything to end up with?
For conferences, I think we just had Vue.js Forge this very recently, last month, where Vue experts were building real stuff in front of students, attendees, and we were building so someone will build something, some feature, some task, then the other expert will continue on off his work. So that could have been ended as a disaster, but it worked out great. They are coming back for a second edition, I think, in August. I'm not sure about the dates, but yeah, that's fun for anybody who wants to learn some new Vue.js stuff.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Unless there is, there's anything else that you guys would like to discuss or closing off, that will probably be the end of our hour together. And some people can go back to bed. Some people can start their day. Jessica may go and have another coffee. I don't know what do you prefer. Luke is ready. He's already looking at the bed in the far corner. But anything else that anyone wants to add? No? Good. Well, in that case, thanks to everybody for joining, as always, on this State of Vue edition on July. We'll see you, I think, in a couple of months, as always. Keep updated on our Twitter and on everyone's tweet. Keep writing with Vue. And I'll see you in the next edition.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.